My name is Diana Thompson. I've been a police officer for 8 years in Boston, Massachusetts. I never imagined my professional skills would be needed at my own sister's wedding, but fate has a peculiar sense of humor. The sky was perfectly blue that Saturday in June, the kind of day brides dream of for their weddings. My younger sister, Melissa, was radiant in her white lace dress. After 5 years of dating Jake, they were finally getting married at the Cambridge Botanical Gardens. I was particularly happy for her. Melissa had always been the good girl in the family, a straight-A student, a stable career as a nurse, and a tidy apartment. Unlike me, who chose a profession that kept our mother up at night. "Why not a lawyer, Diana? Or a doctor?" she would ask. But since I was a child, I knew I wanted to make a difference, not in courtrooms or hospitals. The problem of the day wasn't the bride, nor the groom, nor even the weather. The problem was Robert, my stepfather, who was there only because my mother insisted. "He's part of the family, Diana," she'd argued weeks earlier. I'd rolled my eyes at that moment like a rebellious teenager. Even at 34, Robert came into our lives when I was 16 and Melissa was 14. After our father died of a heart attack, my mother was devastated. 2 years later, she met Robert at a widower's support group. He seemed decent at first, a successful real estate agent, widowed like my mother, polite and attentive. But soon, the mask slipped. Robert wasn't violent. He never raised a hand against any of us. His venom was more subtle. Derogatory comments, financial control, emotional manipulation. He turned our home into a psychological minefield. I, being the oldest and most rebellious, became his favorite target. When I announced I was joining the police academy, he laughed in my face. "You won't last a semester, princess," he said. "That's a place for strong people." Well, here I am, 8 years later, with 2 medals for bravery and a respectable position at the police station. And Robert is still the same arrogant jerk, now with more wrinkles and less hair. At the wedding, I tried to keep my distance. As a bridesmaid, I was busy helping Melissa with all the details. The ceremony went off without a hitch. It was during the reception that everything fell apart. The party took place in a restored barn, with rustic yet elegant decor. Fairy lights hung from the wooden ceiling. Round tables were decorated with white tablecloths, and centerpieces were decorated with lavender and white roses. A band played soft jazz in one corner, and the bar was located on the opposite side. I was chatting with some college friends when I noticed movement at the bar. As I approached, I saw Robert gesturing to a man I recognized as the groom's cousin. Alex, I think his name was. Tall, broad shoulders, an anchor tattoo on his forearm. I later learned he had served in the Navy for a decade. "I'm just saying you're exaggerating," I heard Robert say, with that condescending tone I knew so well. "You military men are always dramatizing your experience." My stomachs. Robert had a knack for finding people's weak spots and poking them with surgical precision. Alex's face flushed, but he maintained his composure, taking a sip of his beer. "You don't know what you're talking about," Alex replied calmly. "I respect your opinion, sir, but I'd rather not discuss this right now. It's Jake's wedding." Typical. Robert teased. "When confronted with facts, you back down. That attack in Fallujah you mentioned earlier? I've read 3 books about it. It was exaggerated by the media." I stopped behind them, ready to intervene. "I'm familiar with this kind of situation. At work, we defuse human time bombs like Robert every day. I recognize the signs when an argument is about to escalate to physical violence." "Robert," I called, touching his shoulder. "Melissa's looking for you and Mom for the family photos." He turned to me with that fake smile. "Diana, I'm in the middle of an educational conversation with this young man. Why don't you go get some more champagne for your mother?" "The pictures," I insisted. "It's important to Melissa." Alex took the opportunity to pull away, but Robert grabbed his arm. "We're not done yet." It was at that moment that I saw Jake, the groom, approaching quickly. He must have noticed the rising tension. "Is everything okay here?" Jake asked. "Perfectly fine," Robert replied. "Your cousin and I were just discussing military history. He has some interesting, if somewhat misguided, ideas." I saw Alex's jaw tighten. Jake placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent attempt to calm him. "Robert," I tried again. "Please, the photos." It was then that Robert did the thing that set it all off. He gently pushed me aside and said, "Step aside, Diana. The men are talking." That sentence, that gesture. It was like being back at 16. when he told me that Guy matters, my business, when he belittled my opinions and dreams, when he made me feel small. Before I could respond, another man appeared behind Alex, tall, bald, with scars on his face that hinted at a hard life. I later discovered it was Bill, Alex's friend from the Navy. "Is there a problem here?" Bill asked, his voice deep and menacing. "Your friend needs to learn some facts about war," Robert said, now clearly intoxicated from the whiskey he'd been drinking. "I was explaining how you military men exaggerate your stories to impress civilians." I immediately realized the situation was quickly escalating into dangerous territory. As a police officer, I'd learned to assess threats in seconds. Bill's fists were clenched, Alex's posture was rigid, and Robert, idiot as ever, continued to provoke. At this point, I sought visual assistance. I spotted two of my fellow officers who were invited to the wedding. With a look and a subtle nod, I signaled that I needed support. Years of working together had given us this silent communication. "Robert, enough," I said firmly, using my authoritative voice, the same one I use when I need to control situations on the streets of Boston. "Not my boss, Diana," he snapped, turning to me with glazed eyes. "Never have been. Always the family rebel, thinking she has all the answers because she wears a badge." That's when everything exploded. I don't know exactly what Robert said next as he spoke softly, directly to Alex, but I saw the man's face change in an instant. Alex pushed Robert against the bar. Bottles fell, glass shattered. People around recoiled in alarm. The music stopped abruptly. "Repeat that," Alex shouted, grabbing Robert by the collar of his shirt. I quickly positioned myself between them. "Police! Stop now!" I shouted, but chaos had already ensued. Bill tried to pull Alex back, but another guest, mistaking his intentions, pushed him away. Within seconds, a crowd of men formed, pushing and shoving, shouting, and eventually exchanging blows. One strategically retreated, assessing the situation. Years of training kicked in automatically. My fellow officers, Mark and Tanya, quickly arrived at my side. "I'll take control," he told them. Mark, left. Kanya, right. "Containment, no escalation. Copid," they replied in unison. I ran to the DJ and grabbed the microphone. "Attention! Police officers speak. All uninvolved, move away from the bar area immediately." The clarity of the order worked. The guests moved back, making room. I could see my sister Melissa, pale as a sheet, being supported by friends in a distant corner. I ran back to the center of the commotion. Robert was on the floor, bleeding from his nose. Alex was being restrained by two men. Bill was in a confrontation with another guest I didn't recognize. "Stop! Boston police!" I yelled, positioning myself in the center. "The next one to raise a fist will be arrested." My uniformed presence would have had more impact, but even in the lavender bridesmaid dress, my authority was palpable. Years of working in high-stress situations have taught me that confidence and tone of voice are as important as a badge. Slowly, tempers began to calm. Mark and Tanya each held their own, separating the contenders. Silence fell over the room, broken only by heavy breathing and a few women quietly crying. "Now," I said in a loud, clear voice, "everyone directly involved in the altercation, please take a seat at that table." I pointed to an empty table nearby. "The rest of the guests, please proceed to the outdoor garden for a few minutes." To my surprise, everyone complied. Police authority is so ingrained in me that it emerges naturally, even in a party dress. As the guests filed out in an orderly fashion, I saw my mother approaching, her face a mixture of embarrassment and concern. "Diana, what happened? Is Robert hurt?" "He's fine, Mom. Just a bloody nose. Please go with the other guests. I'll sort this out, but please." "Mom, trust me, I'm a cop, remember?" Reluctantly, she nodded and left with the others. Jake, the groom, quickly approached. "Diana, I'm sorry about this. Alex has PTSD from the war. When someone questions his experiences, ... It's not your fault, Jake, or Alex's. I know my stepfather well." I touched his shoulder. "Go take care of Melissa. I promise to resolve this quickly and save her marriage." With a grateful look, Jake left. I then turned to the table where the people involved in the fight sat, visibly tense and still fuming with rage. Robert held a napkin to his nose, stained with blood. "Very well, gentlemen," I began, crossing my arms. "I'm Detective Thompson of the Boston Police Department. On any other day, you'd all be on your way to the station right now. But today is my sister's wedding, and I won't let it be ruined any more than it already has been." I looked directly at each of them, establishing silent dominance. It's a technique I learned in my early days in the force. Look them in the eye, unblinking, without fear. Here's how we're going to proceed. First, everyone will have 30 seconds time to explain their side of the story. Then I'll determine who can stay and who needs to go. If you don't agree with my decision, the alternative is that you'll all be arrested for disturbing the peace and assault. Understood? Everyone nodded silently. Great. Alex, you first. Alex sat up straighter. "Your stepfather started questioning my experiences in Iraq. He said we exaggerated our stories to make ourselves look like heroes. When I tried to walk away," he continued, "then Bill came in and your stepfather said—" Alex paused, looking at me uneasily. "Said what?" "He said sissies like us probably cried every night in the tents while real men slept. That's when I lost it." I turned to Bill, who nodded in confirmation. The other two men involved explained that they were just trying to break up the fight, but had gotten dragged into it. Finally, I turned to Robert, who still had the bloody napkin on his face. "Your time. This is ridiculous, Diana. I'm injured and you're treating the victim like a criminal. Typical of your bias." 30 seconds, Robert, I repeated coldly. "Use them wisely." He snorted. "We were just talking about the war. I expressed my opinion based on books I've read. These ... military men can't handle differing opinion, explosive tempers, probably because of the post-traumatic stress disorder they all claim to have." I took a deep breath, suppressing my own anger. The comment about PTSD was particularly insensitive, considering how many veterans actually suffer from the disorder. "Understood. Now, my decision." Everyone looked at, waiting. "Alex and Bill, you may return to the party, but you will be under Officer Mark's supervision for the rest of the night. No additional alcohol." I pointed to Mark, who nodded. "You two," I said to the other men involved, "may also return. Same condition." Finally, I looked at Robert. "As for you, Robert, you're kicked out of the party." "What?" he protested, standing up. "I'm the bride's stepfather. You can't kick me out." "I can, and I am. You deliberately provoked a war veteran, used offensive language, and caused a fight at my sister's wedding. You have two choices: leave quietly or be arrested for disturbing the peace." Robert looked around for support, but found none, yet his arrogance remained intact. "Your mother won't like this. You never got over the fact that I replaced your father, did you? That hurt, but I didn't show it. Years of dealing with criminals have taught me not to show weakness. This has nothing to do with my father or my personal feelings. It has to do with your unacceptable behavior today. Officer Tanya will escort you to your car. You can wait for my mother at the hotel." Reluctantly, Robert stood up, still holding his nose. Tanya approached him. "This isn't over, Diana," he murmured as he walked past me. "For you." "It's Detective Thompson," I corrected. After Tanya left with Robert, I turned to the others. "Gentlemen, understand that I'm giving you a second chance. Don't waste it. This is my sister's day, and I want it to be perfect from now on." They nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. Mark followed them back to the party. I was alone for a moment, allowing myself to breathe deeply for the first time in minutes. My sister's wedding nearly ruined. Robert is at the center of the problem again. Some things never change. I straightened my dress and prepared to face my mother, who would surely be furious with me for kicking her husband out. But first, I needed to check on Melissa. As I walked to meet her, I reflected on how my professional and personal lives had just collided in spectacular fashion. I found Melissa in a side room, surrounded by her friends and Jake. Her eyes were red, but she seemed more composed than I expected. "It's okay," he told her, entering the room. "The situation is under control." Melissa stood up and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Dee," she whispered. "I knew you could figure it out." I pulled away, holding her hands. "I'm sorry about Robert. He won't be returning to the party." To my surprise, Melissa looked relieved. "Honestly, I'm glad. He always messes things up." Jake agreed. "I was worried this would ruin our day." But thanks to your police officer sister, everything was resolved quickly. The friends around her laughed nervously, and the tension began to dissipate. Well, said one of them, now we have a story to tell about this wedding. Melissa managed to smile. I think we need to get back to the guests. They must be confused. Before that, I interrupted. Does Mom know about Robert? Melissa's smile faded. No, she's actually looking for you. She's not happy. I sighed. I figured I'll talk to her. You two go back to the party. Announce it was just a minor misunderstanding. Now resolve. The band should keep playing. The more normal seems, the sooner everyone will forget about it. Melissa gave me another hug. Thank you for taking charge. I don't know what would have happened without you. That's what big sisters are for, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Besides, dealing with bar fights is part of my day job. As they left, I prepared to face my mother. I didn't have to look far. She found me in the hallway, her face contorted with anger. Diana Thompson, what did you do? Tanya just told me you kicked Robert out of the wedding. I kept my voice calm and professional. Mom, he intentionally provoked a veteran with PTSD, used offensive language, and started a fight. I made the decision any police officer would make. You're not on duty. This is a family matter. It was precisely because it was family that I had to intervene. It was Melissa's wedding, remember? Her special day was almost... My mother crossed her arms. Robert is my husband. You had no right, I had every right. I interrupted. As a police officer and as the bride's, Robert overstepped all acceptable limits. He's fine, just a bloody nose. I told him to wait at the hotel. I saw her eyes well up. My mother had always been torn between her husband and her daughters, a position I didn't envy. I know this is hard for you, I continued more gently, but think about Melissa today. She needs her mom at the party, not more drama. My mother took a deep breath, obviously conflicted. You were always hard on him, Diana, and he was always condescending. But today is not about our story. It's about Melissa and Jake. After a long moment, she nodded. I'll talk to Robert later, but you're right. I should get back to Melissa now. As she walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. A battle won, but the war with Robert was far from over. I returned to the main room, where the party was slowly picking up pace. The band was playing again. People chatted in groups, though I could feel curious eyes following me. Mark and Tanya stood on opposite sides of the room, watchful but discreet. Jake saw me and waved, raising a glass in silent thanks. Melissa stood beside him, smiling at the guests as if nothing had happened. Finally, I allowed myself to relax a bit. I grabbed a glass of champagne and found a quiet corner to observe. As a police officer, I've developed a habit of staying on the periphery, assessing environments, identifying potential threats. Even at social events, I never completely switch off. Impressive work there. I turned to find a man I didn't immediately recognize. Tall, with dark hair streaked with gray at the temples and shrewd green eyes. He wore a well-cut suit that suggested wealth, but not ostentation. Sorry, I don't think we've met, I replied, automatically scanning his body language for threats. He held out his hand. Michael Reeves. I'm Jake's friend from law school. I'm also a prosecutor in the Suffolk district. I shook her hand. Diana Thompson, I know. The Cobb sister who just handled a potentially disastrous situation with the efficiency of a tactical squad. I couldn't help but smile a little. Just doing my job. Off duty, wearing a party dress, with no backup other than 2 colleagues. Impressive. 3 years on the streets of Roxbury teaches you to improvise, I replied, taking a sip of champagne. Michael tilted his head, studying me with genuine interest. I've heard of you, actually. The Donovan case last year. You were the lead detective, right? I was surprised. The Donovan case had been complex, a drug trafficker who used teenagers for distribution. We were able to dismantle his operation and secure convictions for all the adults involved, while also directing the minors to rehabilitation programs. Yes, I worked on it. It was an excellent investigative job. The evidence was impeccable. It made my job as a prosecutor much easier. Thank you, I replied, slightly uncomfortable with the compliment. It was a team effort, modesty too, a rarity in our midst. Normally, I would reject advances in social situations, especially from men I met through work. But there was something about Michael that seemed genuine. Plus, after the stress with Robert, a pleasant conversation was welcome. So I continued, changing the subject. How did you meet Jake? Harvard Law. We were roommates freshman year. He went into corporate law, I went into the prosecutor's office. And do you like what you do? His eyes lit up. I do. Putting violent criminals behind bars. There's no greater satisfaction. Except capture them first, I teased. He laughed, touché. We're two sides of the same coin. The conversation flowed easily after. Michael was intelligent, articulate, and to my surprise, a good listener. We discussed cases, frustrations with the bureaucracy of the justice system, and even crime fiction. He had strong opinions about Raymond Chandler that made me laugh. Time passed quickly, and soon it was time for the groomsman's toast. As maid of honor, I had a speech prepared. I excused myself and went to the front of the room. Attention, please, I called, tapping my glass lightly with a fork. The room fell silent. For those who don't know me, I'm Diana, the bride's sister, and as some of you may have noticed, I paused for nervous laughter. I'm also a police officer. More laughter, now more relaxed. First of all, I want to assure everyone that the little incident earlier was just a misunderstanding that has now been resolved. This is a day of celebration, and that is how it will remain. I saw Melissa smiling gratefully. I grew up watching Melissa be perfection personified. While I was bringing worries to our mother, she was winning spelling bees. While I questioned authority, she followed rules. We were as different as two sisters could be. I paused, meeting my sister's eyes. But there's one thing we've always had in common: fierce loyalty to those we love. When our father passed away, it was Melissa, just 12 years old, who held my hand at the funeral and promised we'd be okay. When I entered the police academy and everyone doubted me, it was she who sent me encouraging messages every day. My voice cracked slightly, unexpected emotion catching me off guard. I continued, looking at the groom. You're gaining not just a wife, but a staunch defender. Someone who will weather any storm by your side. Trust me, there's no one better to have on your team when the going gets tough. I raised my glass to Melissa and Jake. May your union be as strong as my sister's spirit. Everyone applauded and drank. Melissa stood up and hugged me, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. When I returned to my seat, I noticed Michael watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not entirely admiration, not just interest, something deeper. The party continued without further incident. We danced, ate cake, and celebrated as if the fight had never happened. My eyes occasionally met Michael's across the room, and each time a small shiver ran down my spine. Around 11 p.m., as the party was starting to wind down, my phone vibrated. A text from my mom, at the hotel with Robert. He wants to apologize. Can we talk tomorrow? I simply replied, okay. I put the phone away and sighed. The drama with Robert would have to wait. Tonight was about Melissa, not our complicated family dynamic. Problems? Michael asked, approaching again. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow, I replied, forcing a smile. He nodded, not insisting. Another point in his favor. You know, he said after a moment, we're always looking for good detectives to work more closely with the DAS office. Someone with your instinct for crisis command and control would be valuable. I raised an eyebrow. You're offering me a job in the middle of a wedding. He laughed. Not officially. Let's just say I'm planting a seed. I appreciate the interest, but I like where I am. The streets are where I make a difference. I completely understand. But if you ever change your mind, ... double quotes. He handed me a card. I tucked it into the small pocket of my dress. Thank you. I'll consider it. Michael checked his watch. Unfortunately, I have to go. I have a trial starting at 9 tomorrow. Crime never rests. Nor those who fight it, he agreed. It was a pleasure meeting you, Detective Thompson. I hope our paths cross again, preferably under less dramatic circumstances. Likewise. Promoter Reeves. He hesitated as if he wanted to say something more, but then he just smiled and walked away. I watched him leave, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and relief. Relationships have never been my strong suit, especially with people connected to my work. The last time I tried with a fellow detective ended in disaster. Since then, I've kept my personal and professional lives strictly separate. Melissa approached, pulling me out of my thoughts. He's handsome, he commented, following my gaze. Who? Don't play dumb, Diana. The guy in the suit you were watching leaving. I saw you two talking earlier. I rolled my eyes. He's just a prosecutor who works on police cases. Just a prosecutor, Melissa repeated, clearly unconvinced. Her eyes sparkled with that mix of curiosity and teasing that only sisters can master. You know you can admit it when you find someone attractive, right? It won't compromise your reputation as a tough cop. I'm here as your maid of honor, not to flirt with guests, I replied, trying to sound serious, but I couldn't help but smile a little. Well, as a newlywed, I officially declare you're allowed to have some fun. She glanced around, making sure no one was over here. Actually, Jake mentioned that Michael asked about you a few weeks ago when we were finalizing the guest list. That took me by surprise. He asked about me? Apparently, Melissa looked extremely pleased with herself. When Jake mentioned that his future sister-in-law was a Boston police detective, Michael showed immediate interest. Jake said he asked a lot of questions about you. I frowned, my investigative instinct automatically kicking in. What kind of questions? Nothing weird. Relax. Melissa laughed at my expression. Just normal stuff. How long have you been in the force? Where do you work? If you're single. ... double quotes. She left the last part hanging, watching my reaction. Very convenient that you only mention this now, I replied, crossing my arms. Well, I didn't exactly have time between getting ready for my wedding and watching my sister break up a bar fight in the middle of the reception. She shrugged, amused. Besides, it seems like you two just naturally found each other. I looked at the card in my pocket thoughtfully. Hey, Melissa said, taking my hands, her tone suddenly serious. I know you've been cautious since the Eric fiasco, but don't let an idiot ex and an even more idiotic stepfather define your view of all men. Eric had been my last serious relationship, another detective who ended up cheating on me with a rookie officer. The entire department found out before I did. It was humiliating, to say the least. I'm not letting you, I protested weakly. Yes, you are. You build walls. You always have, ever since Dad died and Robert came into the picture. Melissa squeezed my hand. You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are. Someone who isn't intimidated by your strength. I felt a lump in my throat. Melissa was always the only one who could break down my defenses. Look who's talking, I said. The amateur psychologist. Nurse, she corrected, smiling. But I spend enough time with doctors to pick up a few things. Over our shoulders, Jake appeared. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to cut the cake. Melissa nodded, then looked at me one last time. Think about what I said. When they walked away, I was alone again with my thoughts. Maybe Melissa was right. Maybe I really had built my walls too high around myself. Robert had taught me from an early age that men in positions of authority were not to be trusted. Eric only reinforced that lesson. But something about Michael felt different. The way he treated me as an equal, as a professional, without trying to minimize my authority during the incident. My thoughts were interrupted by the DJ announcing the cake. Cutting! I watched my sister and her new husband laugh as they tried to feed each other without making too much of a mess. The love between them was palpable. A genuine connection I'd rarely witnessed. After the cake, the guests gradually began to file out. The bride and groom prepared for their departure, changing into travel clothes for their morning flight to their Hawaiian honeymoon. I caught Melissa in a private moment as she checked her makeup one last time. Hey, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened today. With Robert and everything. She turned around, surprised. Why are you apologizing? You saved the day. But if I had been more attentive, noticed the signs sooner, Diana. She placed her hands on my shoulder. It's not your job to monitor Robert. Not here. You weren't on duty. You were being my sister. And yet, when things got out of hand, you stepped in. I can't thank you enough. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I just wish it was perfect for you. And it was. We have quite a story to tell our children. She smiled. How Aunt Diana saved Mom's wedding from complete chaos. We laughed together, and for the first time in years, I felt our connection was stronger than ever. Despite our differences, despite Robert, despite everything. Besides, Melissa continued, Mom finally saw Robert for what he, at least a little. That surprised me. What do you mean? She told me earlier that she'd never seen him act that way. I think she always believed you were exaggerating how he treated you. The revelation hit me like a blow. All these years, part of me had believed my mother simply chose to ignore Robert's behavior. The possibility that she truly didn't know, that he was skillful enough to hide his true nature from her, had never fully occurred to me. "Well," I finally replied. "Better late than never, I suppose." Melissa nodded. "I hope this is a turning point for all of us." Jake appeared in the doorway. "Ready, Mrs. Miller?" he asked, smiling at his new wife. "Absolutely, Mr. Miller," she replied, returning his smile. I hugged my sister again. "Have fun in Hawaii. Send me pictures." "I will. And you, think about what I said about the handsome prosecutor." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help but smile. "Go on, before I changed my mind about you." After the bride and groom left, I took on the responsibility of closing the party and ensuring everything was in order. It was my nature to take control, organize, and finalize. Mark and Tanya, my fellow officers, offered to help. "We've got this, Thompson," Tanya said. "You've done enough today. Get some rest." Reluctantly, I accepted the offer. The stress of the day was finally catching up with me, and the prospect of returning to my empty apartment seemed extremely appealing. On the way to the parking lot, my phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for not arresting me today. It was a memorable evening for many reasons. I hope we can continue our conversation under less dramatic circumstances." Michael Reeves. I stopped mid-sentence, rereading the message. How did he get my number? Then I remembered Jake probably had it on his emergency contact list from the wedding. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, keep my barriers safe. Another part, however, remembered Melissa's word. Finally, I typed, "Thank the Commonwealth of Massachusetts disturbing the peace laws for their flexibility. As for our conversation, I'm free for lunch on Thursday. Diana." I sent it before I could change my mind. A surge of adrenaline coursing through my body as if I were embarking on a dangerous operation. Maybe it's time to let down some walls. Not all at once, of course, but maybe a small crack, just enough to let in a little light. When I got to my car, I realized I was smiling. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. After years in the police force, I developed the ability to function on little sleep, but yesterday had been exceptionally stressful. More coffee would be needed today. As I was making my first cup of the day, my phone rang. It was my mom. "Diana, can we meet for breakfast?" I sighed internally. I knew this conversation was coming, but I hoped I'd at least had a few hours to— "Sure, Mom. Denny's in 30 minutes? Perfect. And ... Diana? Try? I'll be alone." This surprised me. I expected Robert to be in tow, ready for some half-baked excuse my mother forced him to make. "Okay, see you later." I dressed quickly, jeans, t-shirt, leather jacket, my unofficial uniform when I wasn't on duty. I tied my hair in a ponytail and left. Denny's was halfway between my apartment and the hotel where my parents were staying. It was our default meeting place for difficult conversations. Neutral, loud enough for privacy, but too public for any major emotional displays. My mother was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth staring anxiously at the door. She smiled when she saw me, but she looked tired, with visible dark circles under her eyes. "Hi, Mom," I greeted, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hello, dear. Thank you for coming." A waitress came over, and we ordered coffee. When she walked away, my mother took a deep breath. "About yesterday, ... Double quotes, Mom. We don't need. We have to, Diana." She interrupted me firmly. "For years, I've been in the middle, between you and Robert, between what you told me and what I saw, and now I realize that maybe I wasn't seeing everything." I was silent, too surprised to respond. "I've never seen him like that before," she continued. "So ... cruel, provocative. The way he spoke to those men, the way he spoke to you ... She shook her head. "I always thought you were too hard on him, that maybe you were resentful because he wasn't your father." "That's partly true," I admitted. "I was a teenager when he came along. Of course there was resentment. But Mom, the way he treated me, the way he talked to me, the way he belittled my choices, it wasn't my imagination." She nodded slowly. "I know that now. And I'm sorry, Diana. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner." The waitress brought our coffee, giving us a moment to process. I took a sip, letting the warm liquid soothe me. "What happened after you got back to the hotel?" I finally asked. My mother looked down at her cup, We had a long conversation. He wanted to confront you right away, but I said no. Then he started talking about you. The things you said, Diana. She closed her eyes briefly. I realized it wasn't just the alcohol talking. It was how he really feels about you, about your accomplishment, about your career. It's nothing new to me, Mom, but it was for me. She looked up, and I saw determination in them. I asked him to come home today, alone. I almost choked on my coffee. What? I told him I need time to think about our marriage, about the last 15 years. I looked at my mother as if I were seeing her for the first time. Catherine Thompson had always been a strong woman, but I had rarely seen her stand up to Robert directly. Mom, I don't want to be the cause of your marriage breaking up. You're not, she replied firmly. Robert is. Your actions, your words, your attitude. Yesterday's incident only showed me what you've been trying to tell me for years. A strange feeling washed over Miraleaf mixed with guilt. On the one hand, I finally felt validated after years of being treated like the family villain. On the other, I never wanted to see my mother suffer. What are you going to do now? I asked. I'm going to stay with Melissa and Jake for a few weeks. House sit for them while they're in Hawaii. Then, I don't know. Maybe couples therapy. Maybe, double quotes. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Divorce hung in the air between us. I'm here for you, he said, reaching his hand across the table. Whatever you decide. She squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. Thank you, dear. And I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when you needed me. It's okay, Mom. Better late than never, right? She smiled sadly. How's Melissa? I called her earlier, but it went to voicemail. Probably already on the plane. She was fine when she left yesterday, honestly. You know how she is, adaptable, resilient. He takes after your father, my mother commented. So do you, in your own way. The mention of my father brought back memories. David Thompson had been a firefighter, killed in the line of duty when I was 14. His death inspired me to pursue a career in public service, though I ultimately chose the police force over the fire department. He would have loved the wedding, my mother said. He would have been so proud of you both. Yes, I agreed, feeling that familiar pain. He would have. After breakfast, I hugged my mother tighter than usual. There was a sense of new beginnings between us, as if an old wound had finally been exposed to the air and allowed to heal properly. I returned home feeling strangely light. The events of the last 24 hours had been intense. The wedding, the fight, Michael, and now my mother finally seeing Robert for who he truly was. It was a lot to process. My phone vibrated with a notification. A message from Michael. Thursday for lunch sounds great. Federal court? 12:30? I know a great place a block away. I smiled, quickly responding. Deal. Meet me on the front steps. A block from the federal courthouse probably meant that little Italian bistro where lawyers and police officers frequented. Good food, low-key atmosphere. A sensible choice. I was about to put my phone away when it rang. It was Mark, my colleague from the department. Thompson. Diana, we need you at the police station. We have a situation. Adrenaline immediately surged through my body, years of training kicking in. What kind of situation? Remember that human trafficking case we were monitoring? We just received information that they are moving victims today. The captain wants you to lead the operation. I looked at the clock, 9:47 a.m. My day off was officially over. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Oh, and Diana? There's one more thing. What? One of the suspects is familiar to you. Robert Stevens. My heart stopped. My stepfather? No, another Robert Stevens. We double-checked. He's the group's accountant, as far as we know. Money laundering, mostly. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Understood. On my way, I hung up and immediately returned to professional mode. There was no time to process the emotions of the wedding or the conversation with my mother. Innocent people were in danger. I quickly changed into something more appropriate for a tactical operation. Arc pants, a long-sleeved black shirt, and combat boots. I grabbed my badge and gun, quickly inspecting it before holstering it. On the way to the police station, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number. Thompson! Detective Thompson. It's Robert. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. What do you want, Robert? We need to talk. About yesterday. I have nothing to talk to you about. Your mother is making a mistake. You put ideas in her head. I took a deep breath, controlling my anger. I'm on my way to work, Robert. An emergency. I don't have time for this right now. Always an excuse, isn't he? Always running away from confrontations, hiding behind his badge. Robert, he said slowly, deliberately. My mother made her own decision based on what she saw you. I had nothing to do with it. Now I need to go. This isn't over, Diana. You ruined. I ended the call, my heart pounding. Typical Robert. Always blaming me for his failures, always seeing me as the enemy. For years, I'd tried to make amends for my mother's sake, but maybe it was time to accept that some relationships simply couldn't be repaired. I pulled into the police station 10 minutes later, forcing myself to put my personal drama aside. Now, I was Detective Thompson, not Diana the stepdaughter, not Diana the sister. Professionalism above all else. The briefing room was full when I walked in. Captain Harris, a burly man with nearly 30 years on the force, waved at me. Thompson, good to see you. How was your sister's wedding? I forced a smile. Memorable, sir. He laughed. They usually are. Okay, everyone, let's get started. The briefing was quick and to the point. A human trafficking operation we'd been investigating for months finally showed movement. Informants indicated that approximately 12 women, mostly from Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, were being transported from a warehouse in Dorchester to an unknown destination. Our window of action was small. We had information that the movement would occur between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Thompson, you lead Alpha Team to the north. Rodriguez, Bravo Team to the south. I'll coordinate from the mobile command post. The captain looked at us all seriously. These women are scared and probably traumatized. Take a gentle approach when dealing with them. The traffickers, on the other hand, ... double quotes, he trailed off. We all understand. Within the limits of the law, but without showing unnecessary kindness to criminals who exploit vulnerable people. Any questions? Armament information, sir, I asked. Intelligence suggests at least 2 of the guards carry semi-automatic weapons, possibly more. SWAT will be with us for initial entry. I nodded. Human trafficking operations were particularly volatile. Criminals often viewed their merchandise as disposable in the event of a police encounter. Bulletproof vests for everyone, Captain continued. Radios checked and working. We leave in 30 minutes. As the room dispersed, the captain took me aside. Are you okay with this, Thompson? I heard there was some drama at the wedding. News travels fast in the department. Mark or Tanya probably mentioned something. I'm fine, sir. Totally focused on the mission. He studied me for a moment. You're one of my best, Diana. I trust your judgment. But if something is distracting you, I need to know now. Not in the middle of a potentially volatile situation. I appreciate the concern, Captain, but I'm fine. Family matters stay at home when I'm on duty. He nodded, satisfied. Great. Let's get these bastards. 30 minutes later, we were on our way. 4 undercover police cars, 2 SWAT vans, and the mobile command post. It seemed excessive. But when it comes to human trafficking, preparation is essential. I led a team of 5 officers, including Mark. We communicated by radio as we approached the scene. Alpha Team in position, I reported as we parked a block away from the target warehouse. Bravo Team in position, came Rodriguez's voice over the radio. SWAT ready, another voice confirmed. Hold positions, the captain ordered. Wait for visual confirmation of the target. We observed the warehouse through binoculars. It was an old building, likely used for maritime storage decades ago. Dirty windows, peeling walls, located in a declining industrial area. Perfect for illicit activities. Isolated, forgotten, with multiple escape routes. Movement on the east side. A Bravo Team officer reported. White van approaching. I adjusted my binoculars. An unmarked white cargo van was slowly inching its way into the warehouse's side. Parking lot. Visual confirmed, I replied. Appears to be the vehicle described by the informant. All units, hold positions, the captain instructed. We want to confirm the presence of victims before we act. The next few minutes were agonizingly slow. The van parked and 2 men got out, a driver and a passenger. Both appeared to be Caucasian, in their 30s, dressed casually. The driver carried something in his waistband, possibly a gun. Armed suspects, I warned over the radio. The men entered the warehouse. Another 10 minutes passed. Movement at the main doors, Rodriguez reported. The warehouse doors opened and we began to see figures being led out, women walking in a line, escorted by 2 additional men. My heart raced. Our informant was right. Confirmed visual of victims, he said into the radio. Preliminary count of 11. No, 12 individuals being transferred to the van. All units, prepare, the captain commanded. SWAT will initiate. Alpha and Bravo teams. We'll follow immediately. The safety of the victims is our priority. I drew my gun, checking it once more. Adrenaline coursed through my veins. That familiar pre-operation feeling, heightened alertness, heightened senses. SWAT advancing in 3s, 2s, 1s, double. Quotes, the SWAT officers emerged from their positions, quickly approaching the warehouse. Through the binoculars, I saw the drug dealers spotting them, panic on their faces. One of them drew a gun, suspect armed. I yelled into the radio. Everything happened very quickly after that. The SWAT agents shouted commands. The traffickers tried to retreat into the warehouse, pushing some of the women in front of them as human shields. The other women, seeing the commotion, scattered in panic. Alpha and Bravo teams, advance, the captain ordered. We ran toward the warehouse, guns drawn. Boston police, stop! One of the drug dealers fired, the sound echoing through. The SWAT officers returned fire. The women screamed, running in all directions. Mark Sanchez, right? Peterson, with me, I yelled, directing my team. I saw two women running toward an area of abandoned shipping containers. One of the drug dealers was following them, gun drawn. I have visual of an armed suspect pursuing victims, northeast sector. I report, altering my course to intercept him. Thompson, stand by for backup, came the captain's voice, but he was already far away. I ran between the containers, guided by the women's screams. I turned a corner and saw the drug dealer grabbing one of them by the arm, dragging her along as she struggled. The second woman was lying on the ground, apparently having tripped while fleeing. Police? Drop the gun, I yelled, pointing my pistol at him. He turned, using the woman as a shield, pressing his gun to her head. She was crying, terrified, speaking in a language that sounded like Russian or Ukrainian. Back off or she dies, the man shouted, his accent thick, possibly Eastern European as well. I held my gun steady, assessing the situation. The distance between us was approximately 10 meters. Too risky for a direct shot with a hostage as a shield. There's no way out, he said calmly. The place is surrounded. Drop the weapon and we can resolve this peacefully. His eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape route. The woman on the ground began to crawl away, and he briefly pointed the gun at her. She stands still. I took advantage of his moment of distraction and took 3 steps forward, reducing the distance. Think about it, I continued, keeping my voice firm but non-threatening. If you hurt her, the charge will be upgraded from trafficking to murder. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Is that what you want? I saw doubt in his eyes. Good. Doubt means he's considering his options, not acting out of sheer panic. I can help you, I continued. Collaboration means a reduced sentence. Information about the organization's leaders would be very valuable to us. He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he was going to give in. Then, in a sudden movement, he pushed the woman off me and ran in the opposite direction. I dodged the falling woman, keeping my balance, and immediately pursued the suspect. He was fast, weaving between the containers, but I knew this type of terrain. Years of chasing suspects in alleys and shipyards gave me an advantage. Suspect fleeing west through the container field, I reported breathlessly over the radio. I'm in pursuit. He turned left, then right, trying to lose me. It was working. I was losing ground. Then he made a mistake. He turned into a dead end between 2 stacked containers. I stopped at the mouth of the alley, gun drawn. End of the line, I said. Drop the gun. Slowly. He turned, panting, eyes wild. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to fire, forcing me to return fire with lethal force. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. On the floor, I ordered, hands on your head. He complied, lying face down as I cautiously approached. I didn't relax my guard. I've seen too many seemingly submissive suspects attempt one last desperate act. Keeping my gun pointed, I reached for the handcuffs with my free hands behind your back. As I bent down to handcuff him, he attempted one final move. He spun around quickly, trying to grab my leg. I was prepared. A well-aimed kick to his shoulder knocked him down again, and this time I completed the handcuffing without further incident. Suspect contained. Iradia, breathing heavily. I need assistance in the west sector, container area. Reinforcements on the way, the captain replied. Good work, Thompson. I jerked the suspect to his feet. What's your name? Fuck you, he spat, his face contorted with rage. Good, Mr. Ferrer. You're under arrest for human trafficking, illegal possession of a weapon, assault on an officer, and a few other things I'll think about on the way to the station. Mark and Peterson arrived minutes later, taking custody of the suspect while I went back to check on the two women he was chasing. I found them being treated by paramedics, shaking, but apparently unharmed. The operation as a whole was a success. All 4 traffickers were arrested, and the 12 women were rescued. Some required medical attention for dehydration and malnutrition, but none suffered serious injuries during the operation. Hours later, after initial interviews and evidence processing, I finally had a moment to breathe in the station's break room. Captain Harris walked in holding 2 coffees. He handed me one. Excellent work today, Thompson. Thank you, sir. I heard you chased an armed suspect alone, against direct orders. It was a tactical decision at the time, sir. The victims were in immediate danger. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. He was reckless and against protocol. He paused, but he probably saved those women's lives. Sometimes we have to trust our instinct. I took a sip of coffee, relieved that I wasn't facing a formal reprimand. Are the victims talking? I asked. Some social workers and translators are with them now. It appears they came from Ukraine, Moldova, and Vietnam, promised legitimate jobs in the U.S. The same old story of human trafficking, promises of a better life turned into a nightmare of exploitation. And our suspect? He's not cooperating yet, but the others are starting to talk. It looks like we have a real chance of dismantling the whole operation. I smiled, feeling that satisfaction that only comes when we make a real difference. Despite the chaos in my marriage, despite the drama with Robert and my mother, this moment was what kept me going. People saved, criminals arrested, justice served. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Michael. I heard about the big operation today. Congratulations. Is our farm lunch still on? I smiled, typing quickly. Definitely. I have some stories to tell. As I put away my phone, I realized something. The dramas of my sister's wedding, Robert saying back off while I tried to stop a fight, ironically prepared me for today. I've always been the person who runs into danger when others back down. The one who takes control when chaos erupts. That's who I am, both at work and in my personal life. Maybe it was time to embrace this as a strength, not a flaw. To let down some walls and let people see the real Diana, not just the tough cop, but also the woman behind the badge, starting perhaps with a certain prosecutor who didn't seem intimidated by either my work or my strength. I finished my coffee and got up, ready to finalize the day's reports. Tomorrow would bring its own challenge, its own battles, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking to the future with something approaching hope. Because when the fight breaks out and chaos reigns, that's exactly where I excel. That's where I've always excelled. And finally, I was beginning to see that there was nothing wrong with that.